and welcome to our Sunday special session, Power of One. Your dreams matter if you dare to live. I'm glad that the name Summerhill has excited all of you and has pulled everyone to join. Thank you so much. My name is Tina, and I'm the co-host of the session, and I'm joined by Siddharth, who will be the host. On behalf of the entire Oasis family, Siddharth and myself would like to extend a heartwarming welcome to Zoe and Henry Redhead. Thank you so much, Zoe and Henry, for giving us your time.
No problem.
I would like to give a brief introduction for the benefit of many youngsters in the audience who are listening to us today. Summerhill is the most unusual school in the world. Here's a place where children are not compelled to go to class. They can stay away from lessons for years if they want to. Yet, the boys and girls in this school learn. That's the amazing part. Summerhill was founded in 1921 by A.S. Neill. And this year, Summerhill School is celebrating its 100th anniversary. For 100 years, Summerhill has offered a vision of education and childhood that has been an inspiration to educators and parents around the world. After all these years, it is still considered ahead of its time. Zoe Redhead joins us today, and she's the principal of Summerhill School in England. Zoe is a daughter of A.S. Neill, and she was born at Summerhill and has remained passionate about the school throughout her life. She has been the principal of Summerhill School for 35 years, and she lives and breathes her father's philosophy of child rearing, having seen it work its magic on children time and time again. Henry Redhead also joins us today, who is A.S. Neill's grandson. He is part of the management team at Summerhill and a professional sound engineer as well. And during his time as a pupil at Summerhill School, people would say, if you're looking for Henry, you shouldn't look on the ground, you should look up in the trees. So in keeping in line with that passion to celebrate 100 years of Summerhill, he has decided to climb 100 trees. Maybe he can tell us today how many he has managed to reach so far. But he also made a very serious announcement I saw from the top of a tree for the Summerhill Festival of Childhood. And after that announcement, a team of international volunteers got inspired to do 100 different things, which was inspired by 100 different people. And they are creating fun and exciting ways, creative ways to celebrate the festival. Later, we'll hear a little bit about the festival from Henry himself. Today, during our conversation with Zoe and Henry, we will discover more about the driving force of this pioneering school and the philosophy and freedom that underpins the ethos and spirit of the school. Because we have lost A.S. Neill, while we talk of his philosophy, I'm sure we can feel his presence through both Zoe and Henry. And we hope that this conversation will make us all look back into our own childhood and light up the future we are all trying to build. I would also like to introduce Siddharth, who has been part of the Oasis family for many years. He is actually a diehard fan and follower of the Summerhill book, and he initiated a Summerhill circle in Surat, Gujarat. And since 1.5 years, that weekly circle has been ongoing without one single break. So he is actually a true ambassador of A.S. Neill. Before I request Siddharth to take over the session, I'll just make a quick announcement for the audience. We would request everyone to please keep their cameras on, but mics on mute. After our discussion, we will have some time for question answers as well. So please reserve your questions right till the end. Thank you so much. And Siddharth, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Tina. And I again welcome Zoe and Henry on today's dialogue about Summerhill and A.S. Neill and all that work that you are doing. So, wow, 100 years, and a school has been running successfully, and still it is setting examples for all of us around the world. So let us start our conversation about understanding about A.S. Neill. I know we miss him today with among us, but he represents in both of you today. So if Zoe, if A.S. Neill was here today and looking at the work that Summerhill has done since a century, what would be the most satisfying thing for him today? If he was today and he would have to answer this question, what would be the most satisfying moment for him for the work that Summerhill has done till today?
I
What do
think
you think?
probably the first thing would be that he would be satisfied that it still exists, and
Okay.
that Summerhill has not only survived but has thrived and has helped many people throughout the world to have a better understanding of education and of childhood and of children. I think that would be the overriding thing that he would have. He would also be very surprised to see a lot of the things that he sees. This was a man who was born in 1883, remember? That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
For him to imagine things like the internet and so on and so forth would be a real surprise. But I think that overriding thing would just be of joy that it has continued, and not only continued, but it's being embraced more and more. And I think he would have been very humbled by the fact that his writing, his books have been published so widely and read so widely, and that his books have really changed people's lives. And I think that Neil would, he just wasn't a man who realized his own greatness. And I think he would have been, I think he would have been really humbled by that, but we would have had quite a hard job to persuade him to accept,
Yeah.
that he was a good man.
He was an extraordinary person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel so when we read his books in depth, then you understand that he was not only an educationalist, but he really had some deep understanding about how human beings work,
Yeah.
especially the children.
I was
Sorry.
just going to add quickly, Zoe. I almost think that that was actually what was most wonderful about him, is that he wasn't really coming at it from an educational perspective,
Yes.
or from a psychological
Yes.
perspective. He was coming from it from a very human,
Very human.
very sort of simple and sincere humanity,
Yeah.
to a certain extent, which is something that's very beautiful, I think.
Yeah.
But his interest in psychology, and I'm not talking about book learning psychology, the kind of psychology you learn in colleges and universities and schools. I'm talking about the depth of psychology of what human beings are and where they come from, and his own experiences. Of course, he went to some very well-known analysts to try and sort out his own not issues but problems that he felt he needed to sort out. So I think he had a deep understanding of children and where they come from and what their needs really are as people and not as pupils. And that, as Henry says, that's really, it was not about education, it was about people.
Yeah. And that makes him different.
Very different.
Very different from what we see today.
Well, I think the other thing I would quickly add is, and he dared to say things that other people still don't dare to say.
Yeah. That was like he really had courage to speak out whatever he meant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So now moving forward, let's like the audience and me also would like to understand how this whole idea of establishing a new school came up to him, because I have heard that he was a teacher. He was teaching in few schools before he started Summerhill. So what inspired him, or what solution he wanted to find out, or what was that thing that he was not able to do in the existing system that led him to establish a new school?
I think if you read his first book was called The Dominie's Log, and it was written when he was a teacher at Gretna Green School. And if you read his early writings, but also, of course, having grown up with him and talked to him, education was so far away from what he believed it to be. It was so far removed that there really was no way. I mean, he worked at King Alfred's School, which was a very alternative school. He had friends in Dartington Hall and schools that were alternative. He was a good friend of Bertrand Russell, the philosopher. But all of those different philosophies and approaches were very far removed from what A.S. Neill felt he wanted. And really, in the end, the only answer was, I've got to set up my own school. There is no other way, because he couldn't compromise that way. He couldn't compromise that way. And really the only way was to do what he wanted to do. So, you know, he began the school within another school in Germany. And so that he was, you know, he had a department, if you like, and gradually moved on from there. But when he actually set up in his own building, which was in around 1925, I believe, he only had 5 pupils. He started very small.
He started with 5 pupils. Okay.
And it was the first school where he started. It was very limiting. Again, it was still wasn't fulfilling what he wanted to achieve. And so then he had to move. You know, he obviously really had his vision, and he wasn't going to stop until he had actually managed to create. And I think that's also quite interesting a bit later on, when you know, when he was almost I don't know if the word experimenting is the right word, but he was trying things out within his own school to sort of try and understand more deeply what was actually happening with the sort of the PL, Zoe, with the private lessons that he was offering. And he was wondering how much they should be involved or how much they shouldn't be involved. And I think that this is something that is almost very interesting of us today. You know, we're here, but the children are, you know, the school is very much, it does what it does. The less we do, it's a strange way of saying the less we do, the better. The less we get involved, the less we intrude, the better, really. And it's but it's an interesting one of that journey.
One of the outstanding thoughts is that Summerhill was very lucky to have begun when it did. You know, you would be very hard pushed to start a school like Summerhill in this day and age, with all of the requirements and restrictions and everything else. And if this had never existed and you presented it to the education department in most countries, they would go, whoa, no way. I think that you know, it happened at a good time, in that there was a lot of freedom for Neill to go in the direction he wants. And although there was a lot of disapproval from the media, I mean, the media have never liked Summerhill. They have always given Summerhill a hard time. It has always been the school they love to hate, because they can write the most awful things about it and people believe that. And so that's always been a problem. But the actual authorities, you know, the school was able to carry on doing what it did, and as long as it kept under the horizon of being of the media, it was able to carry on. I don't think in this day and age you would be able to do that very easily at all.
Yeah. And what do you think was his main inspirational or people who influenced his thoughts? Like where did Neill got inspired from?
Well, Neill was a good friend of Wilhelm Reich, who was a therapist and a scientist and a very creative thinker, and they were good friends. He was definitely influenced to some degree by his thoughts, but that came later. I mean, he developed that friendship later. He was already moving towards Summerhill. He was influenced, I think, by Homer Lane, who was somebody who started a school called the Little Commonwealth, which wasn't really a school. It was a home for, in those days, they called them delinquent children. So there were children who had serious problems. Some of them had been to jail. They were really kind of hardcore, difficult children. And Homer Lane had this Little Commonwealth, and they used a form of democracy which Neill was able to observe and then make his own choices about the Summerhill democracy from that. So he definitely was influenced by that. And yeah, other than that, I think he was broad-minded. He listened to people, but he was very focused on the direction he was going, and certainly was, although I say influenced by Homer Lane, inspired by Homer Lane, I think I would say. I don't think Neill was actually influenced by anybody. I think although he came across as this really mild-mannered, sweet man. He was a mild-mannered, sweet man, but he was very, very focused when it came to children and what children should. And he got, the only times I ever saw him stirred to anger was when he was talking about people mistreating children or the education system mistreating children. That made him very angry indeed. So I think he was a lot more focused than we thought he was.
So he was.
Yeah, so
he was carrying his own vision in his heart, which he
yes,
wanted to bring out. Yeah,
I've used the wrong words in saying he was influenced. He wasn't. He was
he was
inspired.
not. He was
And he
inspired.
learned from people, but actually he was going in his own direction.
Yes, yes, yes. And as you told that starting this such type of school is never easy. Media was always eager to write anything about Summerhill. So
And still are today.
they're still okay, okay, and they are still, yeah, corrected. They're still okay. So in such time, what do you think was the deepest point you have observed in life of A.S. Neill? Like some point where he was very in some deep dilemma or despair, or did he thought any time in his life that he should stop the school? Sometime, was there any such point in his life?
I have no recollection of that. I think
Okay.
probably the darkest times were when we were very low in pupils. And I have a memory when I was a young child of the school going down to around about 25 to 30 pupils, which is very, very low. And then Neil came across Harold Hart, who was a publisher in America. And then the books were published, A.S. Neill's book, Summerhill, was published in America, where it became a #1 non-fictional bestseller in the whole of America. So it was a huge success. And from there, the pupils built up. I don't think there was any particular dark time. I think actually the dark times were left for me, really. I think I'm the one who's had the really dark times and the moments of doubt.
Yeah. Thanks for that one, Neil. Thanks for that one, Neil.
Yeah, exactly. I think he managed to push them all forward until I came along.
He prepared you for that.
Pardon?
He prepared you for that.
Yeah, well, I don't think he did really, but I mean, I got them, whether I liked them or not. So we had a terrible time with the press when a film was made that basically scammed the school, and then of course we had the fight against the government against closure. So, we've had quite a few big occasions, and I know that Neil did as well, but not in quite the same way. He didn't. I don't think he ever would have considered closing the school.
Okay, so he was always optimistic. And as you told that in the time where the pupils were less, he found out an alternate way of writing a book and publishing it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a big success.
I think that was partly chance. I don't think Neil engineered it. He wasn't a businessman at all, but I think it was a lucky chance that it happened like that.
Yeah. And it became a blessing in disguise. Like this book is still inspiring millions of people around the globe. I think it has been translated in so many languages, and so it has reached to a lot of people.
Yeah, you're quite right.
Okay. So I know audience over here might have read and heard about Summerhill School, but who better than you two to explain how Summerhill stands different from other schools? Can you share our audience from both of you? How do you think?
It's about as different from other schools as that and that.
So explain what's that.
Well, it's I think just the very fact, if you say if you bump into somebody in the street and you say, my child goes to a school where they don't have to attend classes, that's as different from conventional education as it can be.
Yes, Henry.
Well, I was going to add, I think something that's also interesting of that, there's a few things about Summerhill that come up very quickly. The fact that there's all the freedom that the children have, and the democracy that we have meetings, and the non-compulsion. These are sort of almost the standard things that come up. I think for me, one of the most powerful things really is the sincerity in the relationships. The way we understand each other, the way we're very true to ourselves, and I think that this is something that comes at a real sort of deep level. We talk about the trust that we have in children and in childhood, and that sort of that very deep unconditional love that we have for all of the people within the community, and that respect we have for all of the people in the community. And it's a very powerful thing. It's quite difficult to replicate. There's something very, very. I guess I've done a lot of traveling. I've visited many schools. I've seen a lot of wonderful, amazing projects. There's still something very unique about Summerhill, and I think it is to do with the community aspect, that everybody lives together. We all But there's something that I think has still come from 100 years, that whether we tried to get rid of it, we could never get rid of it, because it's been planted so deeply by Neill in the very earlier stages. And it's to me, is arguably the most beautiful part. It's the wonderful, simple thing about relationship, that our attitudes towards children, our the way we just live our lives, we get on with it, we don't interrupt, we don't, and it's a very powerful thing.
I just add something to that, Henry?
Yeah.
I think that one of the ways it can be summed up is the equality that we have. When we talk about equality at Summerhill, we don't talk about like political equality. We don't talk about everybody having equal rights. It's not about that. It's about us being equal as people. So strangely enough, it's one of the few schools where an adult could actually get angry with a child and it would be considered okay. Because if you're equal to somebody, then you can show your anger sometimes. Of course, you can't intimidate them and frighten them, but you can show your real feelings because you are actually equal. But so many times adults all over the world have this kind of inbuilt caring feeling about children, that whatever you do, it has to be about the child. You have to dance around the child. You have to be so careful. And actually, that's a very patronizing way to behave. Children need to be treated like real people, which doesn't mean you talk about female genital mutilation to a 7-year-old girl. Of course it doesn't, but you need to be real about the world and about how your feelings are. And I think that equality is what you're talking about, Henry, isn't it? And that's a fundamental thing.
It's a very powerful part, and it means that everybody has this wonderful sense of relaxation, that they can they understand to a deeper sense without even thinking. I talk about it in a deeper sense, but it's not actually very deep at all. But actually, the individuality is, you just are. You don't try.
You don't need to camouflage anything.
You don't need to camouflage everything. Everything's laid out all over the table, and we're all wrong, and we're all crazy and lovely, and all of these wonderful. We're mad. We're all of these lovely and wonderful things, and everybody just has this wonderful calmness. About that, and I think it's the processes of the meeting process is very important. The democracy is a very important element that happens because we live our lives in that way to assist the equality and the independence you have. And then obviously the non-compulsion to lessons is just the most healthy way to talk about school, basically. The most simple way of talking about education. So, but apart from that, then, that real sincerity, exactly as Zoe said, the equality, these are they're really, really powerful. Unconditional love. I think unconditional love is another very important part of it. Warts and all, we accept everybody. It's not always great. I've been woken up, if I'm doing cover and I've been woken up at 2 a.m. by little kids jumping around and playing. Well, that's not okay. And it's not always happiness. But it's a really profound, I think that's a very simple and very profound part about what Summerhill is and has been. And I don't think will ever change, Zoe. I don't know what you think about that, but I think it's been there since the beginning, and it's there all the way till today, and will be there.
I think the expression unconditional love is absolutely what Neill spoke about and what we feel at Summerhill. But one has to be careful in this modern age that people don't think that means everything for the children. They can do what they like, and smiling and so on. And as Henry says, Summerhill's a very real place, and things go wrong all the time. And some of our children can be really nasty sometimes. And some adults are not always wonderful either. Things go wrong. We live in a real community, and I think that's where the equality is important. That you can, as long as you're respectful to other people, in the end, it is important that real feelings can show, and that it's not a utopia all of the time. It's lovely when the sun shines and things are going well, but like all communities, things sometimes are not great.
And then how does such, like you are talking about freedom of expression and unconditional love, and very realistic world that adults can get upset with children and children has to obey some rules and it's okay. Like everybody, nobody has to camouflage their emotions and feelings, and they can be what they are with each other.
Yeah, but they still can be, ticked off by the community, you know, in the
Yeah.
school meetings. If somebody's behaving badly, then they will get a hard time from the rest
Yeah,
of
yeah. So
the it may be another child, or it may be Henry, or it may be me, it may be anybody, but we'll say, what you're doing is out of order, that's not okay. And they will perhaps get a fine from the meeting. So they may have to go and pick up litter for half an hour, or they may have to they're not allowed to watch their screens for 24 hours. So, you know, it's not an easy ride. It certainly is not an anarchy where everybody just does what they want. It's a very strict, we have about 450 rules at Summerhill. And if you break the rules, you get sanctions for it.
And all these rules are made by
all of us.
All of us.
Yeah.
So the community is the contributor of the rules.
Everybody makes the rules. I would say that, you know, the adults are very much less than the pupils. So there's about 18 adults to the rest of the community. So we're not a majority, but we have the right to make our vote as well. It's not just about the children. You know, I worry sometimes that some people who are starting schools or trying to follow Neill's philosophy do a little bit like, oh, we'll ask the children what they want. No, I want my rights as well. You know, I have the same rights as the children, and I want to be treated with that respect. And I want to be able to, you know, I don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night, as Henry says, by somebody bouncing around making noise. And I will stand my ground and be angry about it if that's the case.
Okay.
Again, the importance of sincerity. That's the importance of that lovely sincerity. And I think that in the meeting process, we see that in all of the wonderful context, to a certain extent, that we, you know, there'll be a child will bring up a case because someone had made a mess in their bedroom, or someone had broken a trampoline law, or something, you know, something would come up, and that would be really powerful and really important to them. But it's the same for all of us. If someone wakes me up in the night, then I'll bring it up as well. These very sort of the sincerity to what to a certain extent, what the sincerity does is it means that everybody's boundaries are all visible. But they're all there. You can see them. You understand if you've upset someone, then you'll understand. Then they'll tell you that, and they'll bring it to the meeting, and everybody, because of the equality as well. It means you get this really lovely, simple, very simple actually, but really lovely sort of sense of sort of living together and just being together in a simple way.
Okay, so we are looking at a community where everybody are free to tell what are their boundaries. Everybody respects each other's boundaries. No, there is no camouflaging of your action. No, nobody respects.
All the time.
Not all the time. They are, but if they don't, then they bear the consequences also. Yes. Maybe it's an adult or a child. I'm not talking of a very ideal world, but a world which is very real, where it is defined, and if you cross that, you have to bear the consequences.
Absolutely.
Where the rules of the community are set by all the people. It's not only the adults who are setting the rules. So now, when the audience visualize such type of community, let's explain us how such atmosphere has an impact on child's growth. How does it deeply impacts a child, and where does it impact?
I think one of the most important ways that it impacts on the children is that they realize that they have a voice and they are important, and that they are, you know, whoever they are, whether they're male, female, whether they have different issues about gender or whatever, it doesn't matter what color, what race, what country they come from, everybody in Summerhill is equal. And I think that's one of the most important things that you learn from a very young age, is that when you're 5 years old and you go to the school community, which is a room with, say, 70 people sitting in it, you go to that community and you either say, I have a problem, please help me to sort it out, or you say, I'm angry because somebody stole my bicycle. They will listen to you. So you realize immediately, the first time you do that, you realize, hey, I'm important. People care about what has happened to me. And I have the right to say what I want to say, and I have the right to vote, and people will count my vote. So immediately you become a strong individual. And if you begin that young enough, and it obviously works much better if you arrive at the age of 4 or 5 than if you come at 12 or 13, but still the process will happen. You learn, I am an important thing, I am an individual, and I matter. And that's something that everybody needs to feel about themselves. But as you were saying so rightly just now, it's also really important that they understand, I'm not the most important thing in the world. I live in this community and I have to be answerable to everybody else, because modern children are often taught that they are, the world revolves around them and they can have everything they want. And it's, well, certainly in our society, that's what happens. So it's also important for them to realize that it isn't all about you, it's about other people as well. And you have to take responsibility for your actions. You know, too many, I'm sure all of you have the same thing, too many politicians have no idea that you have to take responsibility for your actions. And if everybody understood that, I think the world would be a much more happier and much better balanced place. So, you know, so we start with the children, and we hope that one day perhaps they will be the leaders of the world who will be able to actually get into mature discussions.
I think I'll add something as well. It interlinks very much with what Zoe was saying, which we haven't mentioned yet really, but one of the founding philosophies of Summerhill School is freedom, not license.
Yeah.
A very important element. Now, at Summerhill, we see this in a few different contexts. There's self, so freedom. I have the freedom, and I have to respect other people's freedom. But you also have that too, and so to a certain extent is freedom with responsibility. Freedom to myself, but responsibility to others and their freedom. But also to the community, the actual. On a bigger sense, actually, there might be something that I really want for me, which I think is great for me. But when thinking about it from the community's perspective, that may not do very well. You know, that might not work well. And so, kind of what that to a certain extent, what that simple freedom does, and this relates back to all of the bits and pieces that we've just been talking about, is it really allows for a fulfilled childhood, to a very in a simplistic form, but at a very deep level. Because the thing is that children need to they need to push boundaries. They need to learn about social interaction. They need to play more than anything in the world. Basically, the most important thing is play. I think arguably, we could say, Zoe, that we've never had a situation when we've looked at a child and thought, okay, that child's now had too much play. I think I can safely say in 100 years, I don't know if we've ever looked and thought, okay, now that child, okay, maybe they've had too much now. We better stop them from playing. I think still arguably, but it's that amazing fulfillment that you see that children get. And that play is social interaction. It's pushing boundaries. It's not always happy, and you know, to a certain extent, at Summerhill, sometimes children can be really horrible, and it doesn't. We're not allowing them to be horrible. We're not saying, okay, it's good to be being horrible, but we're loving them and we're accepting them as who they are, and understanding this is just a period of time they're going through. And we will still find them in meetings, and we'll do all the things that we're supposed to do in the meeting to show them it's not okay, but we'll still love them. And we really accept that children do that. You know, the most wonderful angelic child in the world, that we all sort of, the image of a wonderful angelic, it doesn't exist. You know, they are horrible as well, and it's lovely when they're horrible. It's not lovely, but it's lovely.
It's lovely.
We love them. It's part of what, and it's healthy. Yes, exactly. And
You respect and accept that state of children of being horrible. And
it's a very and when you're talking about the fulfillment, you're actually talking about a child experiencing and deciding, becoming who they are, and through that journey they have to do everything right and wrong, and they have to do, and this is why they're so wonderful and so terrible, and this is why we love them all the time. You know, it's a really important journey that children go through, and I think this is something
that acceptance that you're talking about, you know, I will sometimes be heard saying to somebody, oh, so and so is a horrible little girl. Well, I don't actually mean she's a horrible little girl. I mean she's going through a phase which I went through myself. So, you know, that unconditional love, I love her, but actually I really don't like her at the moment because she's just being horrible.
Yeah.
You know, it's about an acceptance and a realization that people will do that. You don't have to let them get away with it. You know, if they're being out of order, you have to put that right. But at the same time, you don't stop loving somebody. You don't put them in a corner and say, I wash my hands of you. You still
or punishing or things like this. You know, the mentalities around punishment and making someone feel bad about themselves and making them feel as if they're a bad person. You know, that's the important thing that we don't we don't like it. We don't like it when people are doing things like that, and that's why we have the meeting process, and that's why we give fines, and that's why we you know, we then move away, we move on, and it's fine, and we so it's quite a simple I say it's quite a simple thing. Because I think when you try to analyze it, it's not simple.
It's not simple
because it's infinite. It's infinite.
I don't think unless you have deep faith and love for children, it's simple.
I was just going to say that I think from, you know, one could pretty well sum it up from the child's point of view, that when you come to Summerhill or to schools that are run on very similar lines, you have the freedom to be yourself and to do the things you want to do, provided it doesn't upset or hurt anybody else. But the most important thing involved with that is also nobody will sort your problems out for you, but there are facilities there to help you. So if you get into an argument with your best friend, you need to learn to sort that out, because life is not easy. Have an argument.
Yes.
There is always the facility of we have ombudsman and we have the school meeting. So provided you take steps to deal with it, you can sort it out. But what will not happen is a big grown-up will not come up and pick you up and go, oh, there, I'll sort it all out for you. You do need to learn to fight your own corner, but not in a difficult way that's too much for the children. You know, we obviously it's all age appropriate. So you would help a 4-year-old much more than you would help a 12-year-old. And as I was saying before, there are certain things you wouldn't talk about with young children that you might be very happy to discuss with 15 and 16-year-olds, you know. So everything within Summerhill is very, very much age appropriate, and that's important too.
And and so you need such mature and adults who understand this thing very deeply, and that where it is the place where comes the role of your teachers and your staff. So tell us something about how do you train them, and how long do they stay with you, because that's a really challenging thing.
Well, my criteria of staff really is that I always say it takes at least 2 years for somebody working and living at Summerhill to begin to understand what we're doing and how
to begin to understand.
Okay. And I think that for those people who have been here longer, they will say the same thing. I mean, one of the most remarkable things I think about my job, and I mean, Henry will be seeing the same thing now. He's joining us. I see such profound changes in the adults. And so it isn't just a school for children. You know, every single adult who comes to Summerhill to work will be profoundly changed by the experience. And sometimes they will not see what I see, but I watch the process, and it's just fascinating, because they will always go through the same steps of kind of self-discovery and self-realization, and this acceptance of what real equality is. And it brings that, as Henry was saying earlier, it brings that sense of kind of calm, and they are just profoundly changed by it, and I think that's something of great interest as well. So, but it's you know, we have mentors for the staff, and we help them through it, but a lot of it has got to be your own journey as well.
Because we don't necessarily have any sort of, if you will, sort of Summerhill criteria that people need to fulfill if they're coming. In fact, we quite like the fact that we don't have that. So we, you know, because we you know, if it is that we have putting out for a science teacher, and we get someone who can teach who's experienced with teaching science and can take the children through the GCSE, and, you know, really from the criteria element, it's making sure that the staff member is professional and able to do their job, but not necessarily having a deep and profound understanding of A.S. Neill and the philosophies of Summerhill School. To a certain extent,
they have to be enthusiastic, though, don't they? They have to be prepared.
They have to. Yeah, they need to understand that. They need to understand, obviously, they need to understand that sort of what we are. But I think that is what very often, when Zoe was talking about the 2-year process, what very often is actually happening is that, in a similar kind of way, is that when a child comes to Summerhill and they've come out of the state system, they need to kind of spend some time to undo the knots of the state education. And I think that often with adults who come to Summerhill, it's often a similar kind of thing. Society puts very specific expectations on the way that children should be educated or even treated in all sorts of different professional kind of areas, I guess. And so sometimes someone, a parent, a staff member who first comes, you can see that there's sort of a part of them that's going, me as a human being, I'm okay with it, but me as a teacher, I'm worrying, I'm anxious, and should I do this and should I not do this? And they find it quite difficult to a certain extent. But
it's the ultimate thing for any teacher. I think every teacher in the world should experience what Summerhill teachers experience, which is, you could prepare your lesson today for tomorrow, and you've got everything ready, and maybe nobody will turn up.
Yeah, you have to be precise for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and that's okay. And you cannot complain.
It's very annoying, and it can be a bit hurtful. And when you're a new teacher at Summerhill, you immediately start to question yourself. But perhaps they're good questions that teachers would need to ask themselves. So in a way, it's a very, for every teacher to imagine a situation where the children do not have to come to class. And how do you feel? Your first instinct is, I'm doing something wrong. They don't like me. But actually, it could be because the sun's shining and everybody's having a different experience outside. And of course, later with the more, with the older children who are preparing for exams, they will come anyway because they're studying for exams. But for the younger children, if you have a sunny day after a week of rain, they're outside. And whatever you've prepared is likely to be sitting there. But there's always another day. And so the way we need to support those teachers is to say, it's okay. It's not because they hate you. This is what happens sometimes. Yeah. So we need to give them a lot of support, but we also need our teachers and our staff members to understand that you cannot come to Summerhill and relive your childhood. You cannot come to Summerhill and behave like an idiot because you just feel that you have the freedom, because you don't. You're an adult. My father told a story about how one day there was a huge queue outside one of the toilets, and all the people were queuing up outside the toilet, and the door was locked. And they discovered that one of the new teachers had gone into the toilet, locked the door, and then climbed out of the window. And he was laughingly saying, "Oh, ha ha, I've always wanted to do that." If that happened at Summerhill, if that happened, the children would all be going, "Oh, grow up." We expect our adults to behave like adults. This isn't a place for an adult to lock the toilet and then climb out of the window. But he obviously thought that, I can do that at Summerhill, and I really want to do this childish.
Yeah, but that okay.
I think I'm just going to add one more little thing, actually, that's very interesting to do with the kind of the learning element of it. I think that something that we're seeing a lot more nowadays is that there's a sort of whether it's a societal thing, that children won't learn, and that adults have to teach them. So the only way that a child will learn is with an adult.
Somebody teaches them.
Exactly. Yeah. Now this is sometimes it's an area that actually a lot of the other work that I'm doing about sort of supporting people starting up schools and implementing more of these sorts of methods into, for example, the state school system and bits and pieces like that. A lot of the angles that we're sort of thinking about at the moment is how is almost the less you do, the better it will be.
Better it would be, yeah.
Allowing, you've got to creating a learning environment where the teacher is there but also very aware that actually there's, you know, that there could be other people in the classroom who could teach. There's, you know, I'm as you mentioned, I was a professional sound engineer. Well, if you ask me about embroidery or anything to do with science, I'm not going to be the person to ask. And so when sort of thinking of the learning kind of context, especially within a school, it's another very interesting angle, because actually children are very thirsty, they're very motivated, they're very interested naturally. If you just move out of the way, then amazing,
they will grow. Yeah, that
you'll allow at their pace, and they'll be following their own interests and their own motivations and their own independence and all of these powerful words, you know.
Talking about the equality, I think one of the really important things is that we try to make the children at Summerhill understand that learning is your responsibility.
It's your responsibility, yeah.
But I would have to, just 1 second, I would just have to add, obviously there can be very inspirational teachers, and obviously some teachers are much better at it than others. I mean, it's just, that's the way it goes. And we've all met teachers in our lives probably who inspired us, and it's really important to do that. And some people inspire you by being a little bit more formulated, and some people inspire you by saying, oh, let's go out and try and do so and so today. So there's lots of different ways to do it. It's about your relationship with the pupils. So I would never say that teachers are just teachers and that the learning belongs to the pupil, but I would say that pupils need to know it's my responsibility to do the learning, and I have teachers who are committed and who are inspirational and who are hardworking to help me do that.
So the responsibility of the learning lies on the child, while the teacher's role is to facilitate that curiosity, the urge of learning that the child has.
Yes, but I mean broadly, but of course the teachers are hugely responsible.
Of course.
Well, I think
what you're saying is you can't learn.
But you don't go with a mindset that if I don't teach children will not learn anything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. But again, we put the freedom, not license. We put it on individuals. We put it on community, but it's also to do with learning as well. So the response. So we all hold responsibility to that moment of excitement of learning, and it's not necessarily from a teacher to a child. It can be children to children. It can be adults to adults. It can be everything really. That when you get that moment. But the point is that you have to bring something to the table as well. You need to bring your and to a certain extent, from our perspective, we're very lucky that we have the opportunity of doing non-compulsion. Many people who work in traditional education, they don't have that privilege to be able to make the learning non-compulsion. And that's a very powerful one that we have, because it means that children come with motivation, and that they come with interest, they come with their own responsibility to a certain extent to that moment as well.
I think I will add that with the primary age pupils, it is really important to have somebody who loves to inspire them to try different things and understand different things. I love that too, and only the other day I had a group of children up here feeding my fish in my pond, and and we talked a lot about fish, and I love that. And I think for the primary age children, that's particularly important. When you get onto the secondary level and people are preparing for exams, I think the most important things that I would share with my teachers is you have to be honest with the children. You have to tell them where they are. If they're not doing enough work, you have to tell them that you're not doing enough work. You are going to fail this exam. You have to tell them it like it is. And you also have to make it clear to all children that you cannot pass this exam for them. That's what I mean about them taking control.
Being responsible.
Nobody can pass an exam for somebody else. You've got to be receptive, and you've got to put in the work, and you've got to do the learning yourself. And no matter how wonderful your teacher is, they cannot pass an exam for you. So I think those things are important. But obviously with the younger children, perhaps more input from the teacher, more inspiration, more trying to do different things is great too, because the children don't have to follow an exam curriculum. They actually are free to learn about whatever is shown to them, and that's exciting too.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I would like to invite my co-host Tina to share a few questions that she has for you. Tina?
Okay. Yeah. Actually, on behalf of some of the parents who are listening to us, I have a few questions which I thought are very important that we should, get your perspective on them. We as parents, we've always had these century-old conflicts of how to trust our children. How much freedom do we give them? Because one of the things about freedom is that it comes with no security gates to protect kids from committing actions with unpleasant consequences. So there's a lot of fear in parents. So like we talked about freedom's not a license. What is the distinction exactly between freedom and license, which is tough for parents and teachers to grasp?
Henry, I need to advertise my new book now.
Yeah, you do, Zoe.
I'm just about to publish a book about parenting. It's about parenting, not about Summerhill, but about parenting.
That's wonderful.
And I will answer all of those questions in that book.
Oh, wow.
Coming soon. Coming soon.
Coming soon. Okay. Maybe you can give us a sneak peek.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Come on, Zoe.
So, I've spent quite a lot of time over the last 3 years trying to analyze what it is that is successful about Summerhill, the school which has been running for 100 years, and how we can take some of those things that we've learned into the home, because obviously parents don't have a community, they don't have a school meeting, and it makes it very difficult. And I think the message that I try to give parents all the time is that the first and most important thing to remember is that your children do not belong to you and they owe you nothing. And that's a really important thing for parents to have in mind. They're not yours to steer and make decisions about. They're yours to shepherd. They're yours to care for and to steer in directions loosely, but not to actually train and have on a leash and make them do as they're told.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll just add something a little bit about to a certain extent in the form of the freedom not license. To a certain extent, is that we have seen a lot of situations where parents have brought children to Summerhill who basically what they have done, which you can't say it's a bad thing, but what they've done is they love their children so much they want to try and give them as much freedom as they can, because they think that that's where the child is happy, and that's then and what this does is it actually creates quite a rift in the freedom not license sort of balance kind of area, and children don't actually like to be. It's a weird way of, I'm not too sure if I know a good way of explaining this without making it sound like I'm talking about animal training. But they don't want to be at the head. They don't want to be the most important people in the whole family. They don't feel secure in that situation. They don't want to be the one who takes all the cake and doesn't share things and doesn't have equality and respecting of boundaries and things like that. And so actually the being very clear about boundaries and actually having limitations to the freedoms they have. They can't stay up. A 5-year-old shouldn't be able to stay up all night, very obviously. They should have a bedtime, and they should have clear sort of boundaries about things like that. But they should also have that unconditional love and acceptance for who they are as well. As Zoe was saying, we don't own them. They need to take responsibility for their actions as well, and these sort of things are all very important.
I think what I would say is that I think the word you're looking for, Henry, is leadership. You've got to have leadership in a family. You've got to be in charge of the family. And the way I liken it, I'm giving you lots of parts of my new book here, which I shouldn't really be sharing with you.
Coming soon.
If you were to come and stay at my house for a weekend, you would come into the house and I would say, I've put you in the room upstairs on the left-hand side. And I would say, we're going to eat at 5 o'clock and this is what we're going to eat. I hope that's all right with you, but this is what I've chosen for us to eat. And I would say, and tomorrow we're going to go and do so-and-so. And you would accept that gratefully because you're coming to stay in my house and this is my house and you know that. And if there were an emergency during the time you were here, I would call my doctor or my policeman. I would do that because this is my house, and I would call the fire brigade if there's a problem. And you would expect me to do that because this is my house. Now, with your children, it needs to be the same. This is your house. This is your environment. You are in charge. If something goes wrong, you will deal with it. You don't need to discuss your financial situation with children. It's nothing to do with them. You need to steer and to make clear that this is the way it is. But within that, you need to give them a voice too. You need to allow them to say, why is that? Or, you know, it makes me really angry when we go out shopping, Mum, and you keep telling me that I should talk differently to my friend. You embarrass me sometimes when we go out. Your child needs to be able to say that to you as well. And those things are really, really important. But what you must never do, and now we're moving into the most important thing for parents, is you must never punish your children. So at Summerhill, we have a system of sanctions, and we call them fines. And it works in Summerhill because we're a big community and it's not very personal. It's not about one person against another. It's about a whole community. In a family, it's much too personal than that. You know, you can't say to a child, oh, let's have a family meeting and we'll all decide. Well, there's three of us, mum, dad, and the kid, and we're all going to decide what's best because it's too personal. So what you have to do is to make sure that you don't punish children for things they've done, but that you react to what's happened. So it's difficult to explain. So if I'm talking here to you and my 7-year-old comes in and starts talking to me, I'm going to say, can you go now? I'm talking to some people online. If the 7-year-old persists and makes a noise and is a nuisance, what I'm not going to do is to say, I'm going to punish you for that. What I have to do is pick them up and plonk them outside right now as a response to what's gone wrong. You need to respond to issues, but not to create punishments. I hope that's clear.
Yes, that's very clear, because there are times when adults have to, like you rightly said, take a leadership. And, you know, you can't have that democracy going on when there's a crisis situation. Yes. And that's exactly when you take ownership and be the leader and let them lead. And then there are times where you can have a dialogue and have come to a discussion and a consensus and then move forward. But there has to be a distinction.
Yeah, and you can still all be equal within the family. So everybody is able to say what they want, but some people have different roles. And your role is a role of leadership because you are the parents and it's your house and you have to manage life. So it's very simple.
I think that something that resonates really strongly with that is that what we see at Summerhill, to a certain extent, the reason why we have such a wonderful sense of freedom, such a wonderful sense of sincerity, is that children feel comfortable to be free because they're in a place that's supporting them. Yeah, there's the community element that is there to protect them. But on top of that, you've got the management of the school, you know, policies, all of these different things that are in place that create an environment of security so that children can go wild. basically, in simple sort of terms, that's sort of part of it. And I think it's not about the implementation of practices to say, okay, so Summerhill has democratic meetings, so at home we're going to have democratic meetings, because democratic meetings in the home don't really work. It's the mentalities around that sort of thing. You know, there's got to be security, there's got to be protection, and there has to be respecting of each other's rights and equality as well. And there has to be, unconditional love and support, and that the child can make the decisions about their life, and we'll love them for it, and be there to support them. Yeah. So that's true. It's a different entity, but I think looking at it in that way is
I'll let you know. Henry will let you know when the book is published.
Yeah, we look forward for that.
You're already looking forward to reading it. Thank you so much. So there's another point, where the more risks you allow your children to take, the better they will learn from them, right? And for themselves. For parents, who are listening to us today, please help give some example of how this holds true for your life. If something, if you can look back and think of an example.
I'm sorry, you broke up. I couldn't quite hear it.
Okay, so I mentioned that normally the more risks you allow your children to take, the better they learn to look after themselves. So for parents who are listening to us today over here, if there's some example you can give of how this holds true for you in your personal life.
Yeah. I think that risk taking is a really important thing, but again, it has to be age appropriate. Yes. And it has to be something that each parent feels comfortable with. So I would probably be more comfortable to allow my child to take more risks than perhaps another mother who didn't have the experience I have may feel about their child taking risks. I think the important thing is to try and step away from your own fears and see them for what they are, that your own fears must not hamper your child. So be realistic, don't let them climb a tree that's really, really high. If they're not experienced and they're being a bit silly and they're not taking care, then tell them they should stay at a certain level for a while until they've got a bit better. That's common sense. But at the same time, just because you're afraid of climbing trees, it doesn't mean that your child should be curtailed by that. So a lot of the things that I'm writing about in my book is about stepping away from your own inhibitions and your own problems and trying to do that before you actually have children, so that you are able to come at it with a fairly clean slate. And when you have already got children, make sure every decision you make, that you're not making it because of you, you're making it because of them. So, a very simple one will be things like if you're afraid of spiders and your child comes running up with a big spider, it's important not to go, ah! Because you need to not program your child with your own fear of spiders. You have to let them discover that themselves. So you have to take a huge breath and be very, very calm and say, oh, that's a lovely spider.
And then scream later.
Inside the room when you're alone.
Exactly. It's a very simple story, but it's actually really important because it's your own inhibition, it's your own anxiety, and we need to be very, very clear about ourselves as people before we start dealing with our children. We need to be sure that we're not projecting anything onto our children. And that apart from love and support, and that's so with risk taking, that comes every day. Don't let them take silly risks, particularly if it makes you unhappy. You're a person too, and if you're going to be anxious, there's no point in it. But at the same time, don't imagine that there's a rapist behind every tree when your child wants to walk to the park on their own. Don't imagine that something terrible is going to happen at every minute because it makes you anxious. Life isn't really like that. Children don't get murdered on the streets every day. We have to let go at some point and let them take some risks in life.
And I think that the broader context of the word risk taking is a very important one as well, because a lot of it, to a certain extent, it's you dealing with your fears, and you dealing with your fears is moving into uncomfortable areas, and that happens within relationship. It happens within relationships with others. It happens within yourself. As if you're afraid of the dark and you're trying to, we're all constantly battling with these things, and to a certain extent, what we're arming ourselves is the tool to be able to deal with circumstances when they come up, whether it's in a physical context, whether it's pushing your boundaries in a physical context, whether it's mental, whether it's in relationship. Risk taking is a very, very broad thing in that way. I think that to a certain extent, in simple terms, the risk taking is you overcoming your fears, you pushing yourself to go, okay, I'm gonna try this out, and I'm gonna see. And it's personal experience is what actually you're developing. It's you finding yourself as an individual, becoming self-confident, becoming independent, and so understanding how important and powerful those things are. And this is why I think it's an interesting thing in looking at it in that kind of context, because it can be the smallest of things that's not actually a risk. but is a risk to someone. If someone who's not afraid of the dark and someone who's afraid of the dark, if you've been afraid of the dark, you understand what it's been. You know, it's a really scary thing, and you know, it's you pushing your own boundaries to a certain extent, and so it's important, I think, for parents to realize that if you're putting your anxiety onto other people, then they're not understanding their own boundaries and learning about themselves. You're actually limiting, you're repressing is maybe a bit too strong a word, but you're almost repressing their ability to find out about themselves. And obviously it's a difficult thing, because with risk taking, exactly as Zoe said, if a child climbs to the top of a tree and they fall out, or if someone free climbs a mountain and they fall, then you're talking about their life. And obviously this is a bigger context. Yeah. And so, but that thing is an interesting thing to sort of an angle to be thinking about it, I think, with risk.
But actually, tying in with what you're saying, Henry, you know, one of the important things is, of course, you wouldn't let a child free climb a mountain, but if you don't allow children to take any risk and they never get a bruise or a bang, I mean, that's the important thing about physical risk taking and about emotional risk taking, is that you have to, I don't know how it is in India, but in this country, there is a huge number of young, usually males, in their early 20s who have severe car accidents because they drive too fast. And I would argue the point, and there is no evidence to support this, except this is what I feel, that if those children had been allowed to roar around on bicycles too fast and take a bit of risk in that respect, and fallen off into the dirt and got that horrible graze that really, really hurts, and then it gets a bit septic. You know, if you have that experience, I think it makes you more aware of your own capabilities and of your ability to deal with situations if you're driving too fast, and etc. So a certain amount of physical risk taking, but also emotional risk taking. You know, if you do step over the boundary with people, sometimes you do say I love you to the wrong person when you're 14, and you think, oh God, I didn't do that, did I? But it's really important to learn those things, because that by learning your own boundaries, then as you grow into an adult, you at least have more control and understanding of who you are and what your capabilities are, both physical and emotional.
Right. So as parents, it's very important not to be too overprotective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, while they're growing up, so that when they're suddenly teenagers and they have that freedom, they go berserk, you know. So if they've had that gradual training to take smaller risks, then they don't take those crazy big risks, which can take them.
But also, I'll just quickly mention as well, Tina, that it works in both ways, because a lot of the anxiety that is being caused is actually fed from yourself. So when you can actually trust your child and actually realize, oh, wait a minute, actually, my child can deal with that. They got bit by a spider, or they got, you know, they broke their arm, and I thought I wanted to try to prevent them from breaking their arm, but they were running around going, woohoo, look, I broke my arm, yes. You know, the mentalities towards what is going to happen is often really internalized with the parents. And actually, as soon as they start to realize I can relax, they're sort of a bit more like, oh, actually, I can sleep tonight. This is great. and it becomes easy.
I'm constantly saying to children at school, children will come up and go, oh, look, I've hurt my finger. Oh, I've hurt my finger. I need a plaster. And I will look and go, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Just suck it. It'll be fine. That attitude is the way, you know, but as soon as you throw your hands up, in England, we have an expression, we call it mollycoddle. If you mollycoddle somebody, that means that you wrap them up and you nurse them and you never let them go. And so I say, you know, what we mustn't do is mollycoddle your children.
Yes, that's true.